I have concern that Mr. Biden will fall short.
The president is not capable of delivering the message in an effective way.
The clock ticking on Biden's candidacy. Can he survive the mounting pressure?
Pass the torch, Joe, pass the torch.
This morning, reaction from independent Senator Joe Manchin and Biden ally Congressman Ro Khanna. Trump's moment.
I proudly accept your nomination for President of the United States.
The former president accepts his third Republican presidential nomination with an emotional speech days after an attempt on his life.
I'm not supposed to be here tonight. Not supposed to be here.
But quickly returning to familiar attacks back on the campaign trail.
The Democrat Party is not the party of democracy. They're really the enemies of democracy.
So can Trump attract the independent voters he needs? We'll ask Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Terry Moran talks to swing state voters, plus analysis from our Powerhouse Roundtable.
From ABC News, it's This Week. Here now, Martha Raddatz.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Just 1 week after surviving an assassination attempt, Donald Trump is officially the Republican nominee for president, with new running mate J.D. Vance now by his side. But if you thought the former president is now a changed man after that assassination attempt, think again. After promising a message of unity, he slammed President Biden and the Democrats last night with his typical fiery and demeaning language. Yet our brand new ABC News Ipsos poll shows the Trump campaign may have some wind at its back, with Trump's favorability rating at 40%. That's up 9 points since June, and now at the highest level in nearly 4 years of ABC News Ipsos polling. This as President Biden is hunkered down with COVID and facing a swell of calls from Democrats to get out of the race. More than 35 members of Congress publicly calling for him to abandon his campaign. And our latest poll shows 61% of Americans believe Biden should leave the race, including 60% of Democrats. Vice President Kamala Harris fares slightly better overall in our poll, with 46% saying they'd be dissatisfied with her as the nominee, compared to 55% for Biden.
Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Scott at ABC headquarters here in New York. We are coming on the air at this hour with breaking news. President Biden has just announced that he is ending his re-election bid. Just moments ago, the president tweeted out, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision." There are still so many questions yet to be decided and so little time before those questions need to be figured out. So I want to go right away to our chief Washington correspondent, John Karl. John, we are just 100 days out from the November election. Pressure was building on the president to step aside. Now he is announcing that he has.
Rachel, it's an extraordinary moment in American history. This is the first time we have seen a sitting president bow out of re-election since Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1968. And it comes, unlike Johnson's move, which happened in January of that year, it comes after he has already gone through a primary process, after he has already effectively won the Democratic nomination, which now raises the huge questions, as you allude to, of what happens next. In his letter announcing this extraordinary decision, he mentions his vice president, Kamala Harris. He says, "I want to thank my vice president, Kamala Harris, for being an extraordinary partner." But he makes no reference about what he will do in terms of an endorsement. Will he endorse? Will he not endorse? Will there be an open process? What happens next? He says he will talk to the nation in the coming days more about his decision. But now the Democrats have to figure out what happens. Who replaces Joe Biden as the Democratic candidate for president.
And John, you've been reporting on this for weeks now. And just a few days ago, we were live at the Republican National Convention. You broke the news about the growing pressure on President Biden to step aside, even as high as Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. You had top Democrats that really insisted that it was time for the president to go. What was behind this growing pressure, and how was the president receiving these calls?
And Rachel, this morning we reported that a large group of Democratic elected officials who have not yet come out publicly calling on Biden to step out were preparing to go public with their feeling that he needs to step out, get out of the race. This included, I am told, a significant group of U.S. senators who were making the case to Biden, making it through Schumer, in some cases making it directly, that if Biden stayed in the race, not only would he lose to Donald Trump, but he would hurt Senate candidates in competitive races. These senators did not want to publicly pressure Biden. They wanted him to make the decision for himself. But if he didn't make this decision soon, they were prepared to go public with their calls. So this is, at the root of all of this, is a concern that Biden had become so damaged following that debate some 3 weeks ago that he was going to lose to Donald Trump, which for Democrats is an extraordinary, would be an extraordinary failure. But more than that, that Republicans would win up and down the ballot. So you would have Donald Trump winning and potentially Republicans winning back the Senate and expanding their majority in the House. That's why you saw so much pressure. But the pressure was extraordinary. It was the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. It was the Democratic leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and it was perhaps the conscience of the party, maybe the most influential member of Congress who's not in leadership, Nancy Pelosi, all making the case privately, directly to Biden, that this was the only viable decision for him to make.
Jonathan Karl, stay with us as we continue to following these breaking news developments. I want to go right now to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, who is joining us on the phone. Mary, 40 Democrats as of today were calling on the president to step aside. You have made this point over and over again. This was the president's decision alone to make, Mary.
It absolutely was. And look, he was under tremendous pressure, and it is clear that that pressure ultimately was just too much for him to bear. We have seen over the last 3 weeks since that disastrous debate performance a really remarkable evolution in this public really, hemming and hawing over whether or not he could stay in this race. The president initially adamant that this was just a one-off, just a bad night, that debate, and that he could convince the American people that he could still do this, that he was still up to the task of taking on Donald Trump and governing for another 4 years. He went out on the campaign trail hard. As you know, he was out there crisscrossing the country, doing those unscripted events that so many of his doubters were demanding. He did interviews. He did that big press conference. He did huge rallies trying to show his own party that he could still handle this. But it simply wasn't enough, and the pressure just continued to grow. It started off as that sort of trickle that became a steady stream as we saw more and more House members coming out. Then we, as you well know, we saw, the first senator coming out. Now we have several senators coming out, that number growing, but ultimately it was leadership, I think, that really likely tipped the scale here. The fact that you had Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the House and the Senate, coming to him and explaining that if he stayed at the top of this ticket, he was going to drag down Democrats. And then, of course, Nancy Pelosi, the powerful former Speaker of the House, someone who does not do anything without great intention and purpose, making that argument as well. The president, we know, I keep thinking about this, Rachel, he has been spending this weekend sick with COVID, trying to recover at home, but we also know that he has been taking that time to listen, to hear out these concerns, to look over the polling. This is a president who even, on the daily decisions that he has to make as president, wants all the information. We know this. He is a man who thinks through everything carefully. I can only imagine what this process has been like. He said that he would only drop out if he saw the polling showed that there was no way that he could be successful in this race. And clearly he has come to that recognition. He also initially, sort of brushed off the fact that the leadership would ultimately come to him and say, this isn't going to work. And of course, we have, seen that that is what happened. It is near impossible to run for president if you do not have your party united behind you. And this was likely a very, very difficult decision for Joe Biden. He has been in public service for more than 50 years.